And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside as always by my co-host Andrew Johnson. And folks, it is that time of the year. March Madness is just around the corner. Conference tournaments have been going on so far this past week with some of the non-mid-major conference tournaments going on. We are now getting closer to some of our power conference championships going down this upcoming week. And Johnson, next Sunday, as of this time, we will have a bracket and finding out the field of 68.
Yeah, we're 168 hours now away. 168 hours now, we will know which teams will be heading to the tournament and which teams will be heading to the Crown Invite and which teams are going to the CBI.
And thankfully for us this year, Johnson, we do not have to sweat out our team finding out if they're going to make the NCAA tournament this season. Because last year, it was a very rough time for you and I going into the Big East tournament and going into Selection Sunday. It was probably one of our darker days in our sports fandom, finding out that we did not make the NCAA tournament
Five
last
bid
season.
steals will do that, and it is a very weak bubble this year. So if you're gonna have your spot stolen by a bid stealer, it's I'm not gonna say like I don't feel any empathy for it, but uh,
We,
play
we,
better, I
we,
guess.
we know where you've been.
Yeah, but I mean, here's like last year it was one of the stronger bubbles, if you remember.
Right.
I don't think people really remember the. I'll paint a picture of the bubble last year just so it kind of goes through. The last four buys they had, a lot of people had almost. Again, we're gonna say consensus because not like not everyone had the same last four teams going in, but the last four buys going into the tournament were teams like Virginia, Colorado, Seton Hall, Michigan State. Seton Hall didn't even end up making the tournament. That's how bad the bid steals were. And Seton Hall was a great team. They won 13 games in the Big East. They ended up winning the NIT that year. I believe Texas A&M also got snubbed last year. Or were they one of the last four in?
I think they were one of the last four in, if I remember
They were,
correctly, but
yeah,
I
they
don't
were one of the
remember.
last four in. I think last year, but uh, the bubble last year, teams like Seton Hall, obviously Virginia was a joke. They shouldn't have been on the bubble, but you know they were one of the teams
Yeah,
that
them and
got let.
Colorado State making the tournament were kind of wild.
Pittsburgh, very strong team that got let off, got let out. And St. John's, the only team that tested UConn when they blew through everyone in the last 10 games of the season. Double-digit victories to UConn every single game. The closest game they had for a month and a half was St. John's by five in the Big East tournament, 95-90, in a back and forth game. So that was kind of crazy. But this year, the bubble really isn't too strong. So if your team really gets knocked off the bubble this year, I'm going to feel empathy for you, but you have to play a little bit better because there's a lot of bad teams in the bubble. We're going to that later.
But I think the other thing is that there is the potential for a lot of bid stealers to happen as well this season. I feel as if
It's
last
wide open.
season, right? Like last season, it happened a couple times. I think there's a potential that it could happen a couple more times this year because you have the SEC has so many good teams in it that one of those teams could you know shock everyone and just pull off something. You have the Big East because there's five good teams in the Big East and a team like Xavier that's on the bubble right now
They're on a run of a
could
lifetime.
could easily just win the tournament itself and just solidify their spot. Something like
Xavier
that.
this year is what St. John's was last year. They had a really tough time in the beginning of Big East play, and the last month of the season, they've really just turned up the gear. Like I think they lost one game in the last month. So I think there's seven of their last eight.
Right.
13-7 Big East play. They've got 21 wins on the season. I don't think you could really let them out of the tournament. I mean, this would be the first 21 win Big East team I think since Hughes got left out 21 years ago. So it would be quite the snub, at least at this point.
So what we're going to do here on the show today is we're going to break down some of the conference tournaments that have been doing some great numbers this season for the NCAA, and we're going to give our picks for our conference champions. We're also going to be giving an in-depth look at some of the teams that are in the bubble in each respective conference tournament, if there is a team on the bubble in those tournaments, and what they probably will have to do in the respective tournaments to make the actual field of 68 this upcoming next Sunday. So I think, Johnson, let's start off with maybe the Atlantic 10 with their conference tournament. And then
Absolutely.
we'll work our way around some of the mid majors before we go into our power conferences this season. So if you look at the Atlantic 10 itself this year, you have a tie at the top between VCU and George Mason, both teams finishing at 15-3 on the year, with a tiebreaker going to VCU in that tournament. So VCU, we've seen what they've done, in their tournament's history of, you know, winning big games, making it long runs in the NCAA tournament. But a lot of other teams in this tournament have made some crazy March Madness runs. George Mason comes to mind. Loyola Chicago also coming to mind. We've seen what Dayton and teams like St. Louis have done in the tournament as well in years' memory. So, and you even have Davidson, who obviously is not, where they were with Steph Curry, but we know that they've had some history as well. But looking from top to bottom in this tournament, Johnson, I would think, looking at it, I don't know if there is I don't know if there is a team that's on the bubble right now in this tournament that is looking to make it into the NCAA tournament. Um, I think as if you look at it, this conference tournament probably goes down to who wins and gets in. But this is one of the ones where, let's say, a number one seed VCU doesn't win the conference tournament, then you probably decide, are they a bubble team or are they just automatically out of the NCAA tournament in general?
So yeah, let's talk about the Atlantic 10 here for a second, and we'll take a little bit for every single conference. We'll not go too in detail for it because this is more of a recap than a comprehensive history. But Atlantic 10, a lot of people thought this would be a multi-bid league. A lot of hope beginning of the season, especially have a guy like Woj coming over from the NBA to be the GM of his alma mater, kind of save the basketball program. And for the most part, a team like St. Bonaventure did a decent job. Now, they expected to be a lot better this year because they had a lot of chances early on, but they ended up blowing it. They beat teams like Providence in the Big East to kind of like establish some dominance. But they end up kind of be meddling. Now, the other teams that people had even higher hopes for, like you mentioned before, George Mason or Dayton, Dayton had all these chances at the beginning of the year, and they blew it. They had chances against Iowa State. They blew it by a couple points. Cincinnati, a couple points. North Carolina, a basket. So those are quad one wins that would have carried weight into March, and they could pick up the beginning of the season. And if they win those games, they're firmly on the good side of a bubble. And this is probably a two bid league, which I guess technically is a multi bid league. George Mason, another team, really didn't have a chance early on. I mean, they only played Duke and Marquette early in the season, so those were the only chances they had. So they have to win this tournament. I don't see any of these A10 teams on the bubble. The only team you can make a case for is VCU. They
Right.
have a nasty loss against Seton Hall beginning of the year, but again, that's what kept St. John's out last year. Did they learn? Did this committee learn from mistakes that maybe November basketball isn't the best deciding factor? I hope they did, but when you take a look at it, against other bubble teams, like let's say like New Mexico, which is like a solid 9 right now of Mountain West, they have no really good wins. VCU, so like their best win against the year is probably Dayton. That's probably their marquee win of the year. I know they went 25-6, but they beat up like 18 quad 3 and quad 4 opponents. So to me, VCU has to get into the tournament to win this A10. So I'm gonna pick them to win the A10. But I only give them about 50%. I think there's a 50% chance that VCU does not win this, and that we have a bid stealer coming out of this conference.
And I think the biggest thing, because let's say if they win their first game, they would be playing the winner, and I just don't want to double check, they'd be playing the winner of St. Bonaventure and Duquesne. And I'm not saying that's the game they would lose in, but they could lose to a team like Loyola Chicago in the next round because they would have to place either them or the winner of St. Louis and whoever wins the first game, which is Davidson and Richmond. So they could easily, I feel like they could lose to a team like Loyola Chicago and St. Louis. I feel like those are two teams that could give VCU a run for their money when it comes to tournament time because there is, I'm trying to get the numbers right. There's 6 teams in this conference that won double digit conference games this season. So
Yes.
I feel as if anything is possible, and I feel as if if you look at the tournament right now, if you look at brackets, VCU is the only Atlantic team in the tournament. They're a firm 11 seed, I believe, right now in a lot of people's brackets. So if they were to lose this tournament, depending on where they lose, let's say if they lose their first game or their second game,
They're out.
puts them on the bubble, and they probably are not going to make the tournament because they don't have a marquee win.
So this is what I will say about that bubble vote. If it comes down to a team like VCU or Oklahoma, give me VCU.
Okay, so you go with VCU to win.
I'm going with VCU to win the tournament. I think that's the smart pick. Are we going to? Probably not. We'll get a bid stealer. So it's gonna be interesting. So give me VCU because it's the safe pick.
I'm gonna go with my Johnson. I'm gonna have to go with a pick that I made earlier in the season as my mid-major surprise, and I'm gonna have to just see maybe if they pull it off in this tournament because they haven't been great this season. They've been kind of like middle of the pack this year. I'm gonna have to go with St. Louis to win. I'm gonna go with the Billikens.
I mean, St. Louis again. That's a team that can make a run here. I mean, they've
Yeah,
been better as of late, but
they
uh,
haven't been great. I'm just basing it off of what I picked earlier in the season, and I'm trying to see maybe if it will stick to pan. If I didn't make that pick
listen,
earlier,
if VCU loses, then I think it's anyone's tournament.
right. And I think I very much well think that could happen. If it's not VCU, and I know I picked St. Louis, but if it's not VCU, I wouldn't be stunned. And maybe Loyola Chicago has maybe one more run in them to make the tournament once again. So, like I said, I think any one of the top six have a legitimate shot of making the tournament itself.
Yeah, obviously, I think favorites would go. I would say VCU is the heavy favorite, and then it's
Yeah,
Dayton, George Mason. Obviously, sizable gap between those two, and then between Dayton, George Mason, maybe you put St. Joseph's in there. Then there's a really sizable gap between the rest of the conference. So there's two mountain-sized gap, but the gap between VCU and Dayton is probably 2 or 3 times the size of Dayton, George Mason, and the rest of the conference.
okay. Yeah, I agree. I don't. I like I said, I think it's any one of those six. You could even make the case for like a St. Bonaventure, maybe even like the Bonnies. You never know. I think anyone can realistically win this conference. Now, the next conference we're going to go with too. You could maybe make the case as that one as well, but most likely would be a two-team race if you think about it. At the end of the day, let's go to the West Coast Conference, Johnson, and go out to the West. And this was obviously Gonzaga's conference for many years, maybe decades, and now this is
They
St.
had the
Mary's conference this season. It has been the
They
Gales
always had
season.
the occasional interloper of St. Mary's. They always never went away. And St. Mary's they've had great teams over the years that got screwed out of the NCAA tournament. I think in 2017 or was it 2017 or 2018, they were literally ranked 25 going
Yeah.
into Selection Sunday, and they got hosed. They didn't even make the tournament. So they've had some great teams, and I'm glad they're getting their recognition now.
And if you look at where bracketologists have those two, they're both firmly into the NCAA tournament as it stands right now. St. Mary's as a 6 seed, you have Gonzaga as an 8 seed. So right now, those are the only two teams in the NCAA tournament if the season ended. You do have the San Francisco Dons have had a nice year. Santa Clara and Oregon State also with 20-win seasons. So there is maybe a potential that maybe someone outside of a St. Mary's or a Gonzaga wins this tournament. And keep in mind, this tournament, has seen some crazier things happen the last couple of seasons. But when it comes down to is there a team that maybe is there a bid stealer in this league, or does it just come down to these two teams between Gonzaga and St. Mary's to win the conference?
Yeah, I guess San Francisco would be the bid stealer here. I don't anticipate that happening. I'd be shocked. I think this is Gonzaga's tournament to lose, to be honest with you.
Do you think Gonzaga gets it done?
I think Gonzaga 100% gets it done because St. Mary's has a tendency to falter in the tournament, even historically, where St. Mary's has been there kind of like right neck and neck with Gonzaga. They've either swept them or they split the regular season. Doesn't seem like they could beat them in that West Coast Conference tournament. Don't get me wrong. There's times where St. Mary's has, they've conquered the beast, but I don't think it's that year. I think St. Mary's, they're firmly in. The players kind of know that they'd be playing a little bit lackadaisical. And ironically, Gonzaga's the team with a little bit more edge here. So give me
Right.
Gonzaga to win this.
And St. Mary's, keep in mind, only lost one conference game this season. That was at San Francisco, and that was a 1 point defeat in that game against the Dons. But I think the other good thing about it, and I'm glad you picked Gonzaga because I'm with you on that pick. I got Gonzaga as well winning this conference tournament. But the reason being is that if these two teams are to play in the conference tournament, Johnson, the the hardest thing to do in my opinion, in basketball is beat a team 3 times in one season. Gonzaga
I
has
agree.
already lost twice to St. Mary's this year. I don't see it happening a third time. So if you're gonna give me a matchup the third time between these two teams, give me Gonzaga to cut down West Coast Conference Nets and move on into the NCAA tournament. And with the win, probably maybe move up to a 7 seed
Yeah,
in the tournament.
this is why Big East tournament scares me. But we'll go on that in a little bit.
Let's go to the AAC. Let's go to the AAC next. We'll kind of do this on a little bit of a women dime right now. And try to figure out which conference we'll go to next. But let's go into the AAC. And we had a great, how about earlier in the season, Johnson? We saw, Memphis, a team that stunned at that point, a UConn team that was, a top 5 team in the country. They were back to back national champions, and Memphis out of nowhere just pulling off a stunning upset in that early season. And everyone at that point in the year is thinking to themselves, is Memphis that team? Are they finally doing it with Penny Hardaway? They've had a phenomenal season. They're the 16th ranked team in the country. I'm trying to look right now where they're currently seeded. They're currently a 7th seed in the NCAA tournament. So they are firmly locked in to the NCAA tournament. Now, the question is going to be outside. Is there a team that maybe could steal a bid and move into the tournament? Because it looks like as of right now, it's only one team from the American that could get into the NCAA tournament.
Well, I mean, you could have the runner up too. You could have, and this is the team I'm going to pick actually. I think North Texas is going to win the American.
Okay.
I think North Texas is a great team. Again, they haven't really had they lost to Memphis twice this year, I believe. I think they swept them.
I'll double
But
check for you, but I believe you're right.
North Texas has they played a phenomenal game. I know they lost a brutal home game to UTSA, but again, it's kind of like it's a rivalry game. It's like Rutgers Seton Hall. It's like St. John's Georgetown. Uh, they occasionally drop games like that. They have a loss at High Point. Maybe say, "Oh, what's High Point?" High Point's actually one of the mid majors, which I think they should go for the Big South. And if you're a 3 seed or a 4 seed, you do not want to play High Point in the tournament. They play an excellent brand of basketball, and they really took care of business in their conference. I'm expecting them to come out of the Big South maybe as a 13 or 14 seed, but North Texas seems like they just have the it factor for me. So I'm gonna pick North Texas to be a bid stealer here, and they're gonna win the
You
entire
have them
American
winning the
tournament.
entire American?
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with the favorite. I'm just gonna go with Memphis in this one. I could very much well see it happening. I think if it wasn't North Memphis, is probably is going to be North Texas. UAB could be a sneaky one as well. They've had a 21 year. The
yeah.
team that has
UAB is a
beat North
great team.
Texas as well. Um, I think it comes down to those 3 teams in this conference. It's
See,
pretty easy to say that.
I don't think UAB could do it because I think they need more than one guy. And this is actually a guy that Mike Anderson recruited to St. John's. He was committed to St. John's, but when Mike Anderson was fired, Rick Pitino took over. This guy decommitted. Yaxel Lendenberg,
Hmm.
UAB. He was a local kid from New Jersey, and he ends up going. He's a JUCO guy, goes to Alabama, UAB, and he's just been tearing it up. If he was on a major roster, like a Power Five roster, he'd be an All American right now. He had an absolutely disgusting year. 17 rebounds, almost. I'm sorry, 17 points, almost 11 rebounds, 4 assists, almost a block and a half, and a steal and a half a game. On really efficient from the field, he can kind of shoot it, not really. Uh, Decent from the line. You would want him on your team. He would be an All American on any Power Five conference team right now, but kind of went under the radar. And I think he might get some second round draft consideration. This is a guy you might see in the NBA 2 or 3 years down the line. And if UAB is going to win the tournament, it's going to be on the back of him.
Now, how about this next conference, Johnson? This is a conference that had a lot of controversy last year in terms of the bubble and could be in that same scenario this season because there could be a potential bid stealer or two from this conference. And there is a team on the bubble right now that needs to do some work in this conference tournament if they want to make the NCAA tournament. You can make the case that 2 teams need to do that in this one. How about the Mountain West Conference? Let's go into that conference that obviously we saw Richard Pitino and New Mexico, the Lobos, winning the outright regular season title. So they finished as the number 1 seed, followed by Colorado State, who is out on the outside right now in the bubble. You have Utah State, you have San Diego State, and you have Boise State. Those are the 5 teams that right now, if you look at it, those are the teams that are going to be fighting it out in that Mountain West. And right now, as it stands, it looks like New Mexico, Utah State, San Diego State are firmly in, with Boise and Colorado State having to do some work in their upcoming tournament.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought this up about the controversy surrounding the Mountain West last year. Excuse me, I just spoiled my pick there. So the Mountain West had the whole argument was, oh, we have so many quad one wins, and this is what I hate about the net rankings because they're done by humans and they obviously have some human bias to it. Because unless you're gonna have something, even if you when you program AI and it's proven, there's human bias that's going to influence that AI decision making process. So there's no way you can just eliminate human bias from here unless you have people from all over the world. If you had a representative from each conference, put something into it, you balance it out, but that's not the case. So when they got heavily inflated in the preseason last year of Mount West, that included having their initial rankings much higher and during the season, so their net rankings were higher. And it seems like, oh yeah, they had all five, six, and I said this last year going through them. They all had, oh yeah, this team has six quad one wins, seven quad one wins. Not every quad one win is the same. Like for example, we'll take a look at Utah State. Right, they have two quad one wins here. They're probably in the tournament. The 25-6, 37 net ranking, two quad one wins. Now, at St. Mary's in California, which may be one of the West Coast Conference, solid
Yeah.
six seed. That's a great quad one win, right? That is a fantastic quad one win. And the only other quad one is at San Diego State. And then you say, oh, well, what did San Diego State do this season? Yeah, they have a couple of good wins early in the season, neutral on against Houston. They beat Creighton, but that's when Creighton was really down three players, and this wasn't the same Creighton team we see now. Whatever. And then their other quad win, San Diego State has this over Boise State. And then you see where this is kind of going. Then you look at Boise State, and, they have two good wins, and that's probably about it. So I think the Mountain West, even though you have all these teams on the bubble, like you have, I think Utah State and New Mexico are firmly in the tournament. I don't think anything you can do to those two teams can get them out of the tournament. And if New Mexico is not in the tournament, it's going to be because they lost versus New Mexico State at home. I think that's going to be the one game that keeps them out
Yeah, if
because
the only reason I feel like this if New Mexico wouldn't make it is if they lose the first round. Like if they lose to San Jose State and Wyoming, then that would hurt them. That would
that
really
would,
hurt
yeah.
them.
I mean, that would be the reason why they don't get in there because they
Right.
do have a good win, and their best win is against UCLA, and UCLA I think is one of the wins that kind of held up water, even though
And keep them. Yeah.
UCLA wasn't really a great team or a decent team beginning, but now they really turned it on beginning end of the season, and they have tons of quality wins against teams like let's say Gonzaga. They have wins over Oregon, and they have wins over Arizona. So like this is a team that really held their weight, and they're going to be a serious player in March. And New Mexico has that win, so that's a kind of the tip of the cat. So if I think it's between them and like another team, let's say like Texas, I think they'll put New Mexico in over them. But the rest of these guys in the bubble, like Boise State, San Diego State, they need to win the tournament. Even
Yeah,
though
I
Boise
think.
State's like last four in, whatever like that, they need to win the tournament.
Well, keep in mind, and I love the beauty of this conference tournament for one reason. Look at the second round, the quarterfinal. You have San Diego State, who right now is in the tournament, facing Boise State, who's on the outside of the tournament. That's probably an elimination game, in my opinion, for that game alone. Whoever wins at least keeps himself alive for the NCAA tournament. Whoever loses, more than likely, in my opinion, might be eliminated from the tournament itself. Because San Diego State right now is a 10 seed. So a loss to Boise really puts them on the bubble, and I don't really see a scenario where they can make the NCAA tournament if they lose that game to Boise State.
And this is gonna be my opinion too. If you take a look at, there's all these different bracketologies, and I like using bracket matrix because it's an aggregate of the best bracketologists year in and year out. So they change people each year as long as they keep on doing it. And if you take a look over here, you can take a look at the Mountain West. You have people. Some people have Boise State in. They have
Right.
they have New Mexico in. They have Utah State in. Uh, I don't know if San Diego State is currently a solid 10 seed, but I think they're going to get bumped entirely. I know people have them in, oh, they're 10 seed, they're yada yada, they're this, but something tells me if, you know, it gets going to get crazy. And this is only going to be happening if we have five or six bid steals like last year. If you're taking a look at it, and this is going to sound maybe I'm cynical about this still. Say we have five bid stealers, which was a lot like we had last year. Teams on the bubble right now, like Xavier, Oklahoma, Indiana, Ohio State, say VCU doesn't make it, right? Arkansas, San Diego State, right? Say that's the six or seven right there.
Yeah.
If you have five of them go in there, I guarantee you they're going to pick off San Diego State first, uh, even though they're a 10 seed, because I think of the Mountain West performance last year, the committee's really going to sit here and say, well, we now only have 2 spots for these 7 schools, and they're going to start looking at them, like really analyzing them side by side. And we're going to say, okay, do we really want to reward San Diego State for a conference that really didn't do anything in March? Do we really want to award Utah State for a conference that didn't do anything in March? Like that's conversations they're going to start having. And I think if it comes down to that, the Mountain West is going to be the conference that gets cannibalized this year.
Yeah. Like I said, I think that game with Boise and San Diego State for me, talking about when you were saying a few minutes ago about the Aztecs, I think for me, no matter who wins that game, I'm not saying they're in the tournament. I just think they keep themselves alive for another day. The loser is
Absolutely.
probably done. I think that no matter what happens, they're going to be out
Yep, I
because there's
agree.
really no other scenario. You're going to have to pray that the bracketologist or whatever, the committee puts you in, and you're a 4 or 5 seed in your respective conference, and you have no other way of moving on. So whoever
Well, yeah,
loses is done.
the way you look at it, they're both probably at the end of the 10 line right now.
Right.
So there's 4 teams ahead of him right now. They were probably the last teams with buys, if I had to take a guess right now. And like you said, if one of them lose, they get probably bumped down to that, last 4 in, probably maybe the second or third last team in. So kind of in that middle ground. And
Yeah.
then you just need 2 bit stealers and they're gone. So you're right.
Now, question before we make our pick for Colorado State, because they are the 2 seed, but some people have them out on the outside right now in this conference tournament. Do they have to win at least
They
one
have to win it.
game?
They
They have
have
to
to.
win the whole. You
Colorado
think they have to
State.
win the whole thing?
They have to win the whole thing. They have to win the whole thing. I don't even have Colorado State anywhere near the bubble right now.
Yeah, because even a win against Nevada or Fresno State isn't going to help their cause. They're going to have to. I feel as if for them, they would have to win against the winner of. They would have to beat a team like Utah State in the semis. I feel as if they get to the conference championship game, maybe they could sneak in, but it might not be enough.
In my opinion, if your name's not New Mexico, you're not locked right now. New Mexico is the only team
Yeah,
I'm comfortable putting a lock on.
you know the Utah State's a lock.
No, absolutely not. Utah State's resume is marginally better than San Diego State. And if San Diego State washes them, they
Yeah,
could
that's
easily
fair.
get swallowed by the bid steals. Like there could be 6 bid steals. New Mexico's making this tournament. Like they're very lock.
So you have New Mexico winning.
Yes, I have New
I'm
Mexico
gonna,
winning regardless. Yeah.
I have New Mexico as well. And I might just be biased because of Patino coaching them, but I do have. I think the Lobos get it done uh, this upcoming week, and they move on to the NCAA tournament firmly, and then put the rest of this conference in in a bit of a nail biting scenario this next Sunday, trying to figure out if they're going to be in the tournament or not for this Field 68. So let's now go in, Johnson, to the big boy conferences. Let's go into some of these power conferences that a lot of people are looking into. I think let's maybe start off with, I would say, the ACC, because I think for you and
I
I,
thought we talked about I thought we talked about power conferences. Why are we talking about the ACC right now?
yeah, it's been a rough year for the ACC. That's not what we're, used to see from this conference. And I think you and I both agree this is definitely Duke's to lose. But there is Louisville and Clemson. They've had some pretty respectable years as well. You have teams like Wake Forest and North Carolina on the bubble that really would need to do some work. I don't know. Is SMU a team on the bubble as well? I don't know if they
Not
are
even
or not.
close. I
I didn't
think
think
the
they
only
were.
three. I think the ACC has 3 locks in Duke, Louisville, and Clemson.
And
Every
Wake
other
Forest and
team,
UNC have to do some work.
Wake Forest is not even on the bubble for me.
Really?
I think Wake Forest is so far removed from the bubble, they would need an absolute miracle.
Trying to look at where people have them right now. I know some people have them on the outside. Um,
I don't even think Wake Forest is my next 4 out, to be honest with you.
let's see. So I'm looking at the conference tournament itself. So North Carolina, the problem for them is that they're playing in the second round. At least for Wake Forest, they're already into the quarterfinals, so that's a good thing for them. And they would be playing the winner of. I'm trying to look at they would be playing potentially North Carolina. So a kind of a funny scenario in this conference too, because North Carolina and Wake Forest could potentially play each other in the quarterfinals, and the winner of that game will essentially keep themselves alive for another day. And just like the Mountain West, the loser is going to be eliminated from any hope of making making the NCAA tournament itself.
The way I look at it, Nick, with Wake Forest, they have losses to 12-win NC State and home losses to
Yeah,
Florida State and Virginia. and their best win on the entire season is the Michigan. And when you take a look at it, when you can really compare the two of them, they lost to another bubble team in Xavier. So if it comes down to it, who you gonna put over, Xavier or them?
And UNC last night had a great opportunity against Duke. They were up 9 points in the second half of that game against Duke, a potential groundbreaking quad one win for them, and they let it slip away, and they lost by 13. They only have one quad one win on the season against UCLA, who, I mean, at that time was ranked, but they're not the same.
Yeah.
I mean,
And the way you got to look at it too, Nick. UNC lost to like Wake Forest. So
yeah,
like if Wake Forest is in, UNC's not in either.
yeah, I
It's a
agree.
team that's 1-11 in quad one
We
wins.
both agree they both of these teams have work to do, and one of these teams potentially could be done after they play each other in the second and the quarterfinals, and then if they move on, then the winner of that game would potentially will have to face Duke. So, in other words, for one of these two teams, Johnson, to make the tournament, they have to beat Duke in the semifinal.
Yeah, I mean that's the only way. But the way
It's
that
the only
after
way.
the Big East tournament played out last year, and the committee pretty much just said, "Oh yeah, conference tournament games don't even count." That just makes me believe that none of this really matters. So yeah, Wake Forest make it to the finals, ACC finals. I still don't think they make it. Like, I think it's gonna be crazy. But
I know,
my,
but if
my
you're beating Duke, I feel like that's going to help you somewhat. I
I
know
mean,
it's
the way I look at it, how cynical I am, is because last year the committee flat out said, "Oh yeah, St. John's could have beat UConn, and they wouldn't have put them in the tournament." That's why flat out
uh,
when they said that last year, like, okay, well, last year's UConn squad is miles better than this Duke squad, and if you Wake Forest and St. John's were in the exact same position last year, I can't do it. So I think Wake Forest needs to win the whole tournament.
yeah, I don't disagree. I think, say, if you're North Carolina, they would have to win the whole thing.
And again, this is all hearsay because now the committee could have changed things overnight. They don't say anything. It is what it is, but we'll find out.
And if you look, obviously Duke is a 1 seed going into the tournament. Clemson right now is locked in as a 5. Louisville is a 6. So as you mentioned, the only three teams that are firm locks for the NCAA tournament, with North Carolina and Wake Forest probably having to win the conference tournament to make it even in, and that could be a bid stealer. Because remember, this conference was the bid stealer last year with NC State winning it all and moving on far into the NCAA tournament. So
Which
stranger things
NC
have
State's
happened in
head
this
coach just
conference.
got fired. By the
He
way,
did
he
just get
just got
fired today. I did see that.
so
I
he
did
was
see that.
that man walking last year, and I guess he gave him another year in his contract. So
Yeah, he was supposed to. Yeah, right, because he was supposed to be gone last season, and they just made that crazy run.
yep.
So, do we see it happening again this year with a bit stealer, or do we just think Duke's gonna
Out of the
just too
ACC,
dominant?
out of the ACC, I don't think so. I think Duke will win it,
Yeah,
and I think here's the thing: experience wins in March. So I think Duke will either win the ACC or have a deep run in the tournament. They're not going to have both, and I'm going to pick them to win the ACC.
yeah. I would be stunned if they don't win. I know they've looked, they've had some closer games as of late. I just don't see it. I know obviously they blew out Illinois by like 40, but I just don't see Duke losing this conference tournament. They're a different team than the team we saw last season. Cooper Flagg's the best player in the nation. He's just been balling out for this team all year. I just don't see them losing, especially considering the fact that this is basically a home tournament for them as well. I just can't see them losing this one. So I have Duke win the ACC as well. Trying to think what's conferences next. I let's go with the Big 12 maybe.
I'm going for Big 12. The
Okay,
Big
let's
12 is
let's go with
fine.
the Big 12 next. This is a conference where there's a lot of teams that are right now are in good position to make the tournament. I think as of now, maybe they have 7 or 8 teams potentially making the NCAA tournament.
I have
For,
8 teams right now. 8 teams, 7 teams, which I think are almost locks, and then there's West Virginia.
yeah, so you have Houston is a lock, obviously. Texas Tech is a lock. You have Iowa State, Arizona, BYU, Kansas at 6, Baylor 7, and then West
And West
Virginia
Virginia.
right now is the 8 team. I
Yeah, they're the
think,
team that's susceptible to the bid stealer. They may
yeah,
be cannibalized.
yeah, I think they're in, but everything could really
Again,
change in the
seven,
women of a
again,
dime.
7 bid stealers changed it. So like I'd say
Yeah,
if there's 7 bid stealers, absolute catastrophic meltdown in every single Power Five conference. That the poll of every conference wins the tournament. That's when West Virginia,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, when the pall of every conference, or like Miami wins the ACC,
And
Seton Hall
you know
wins
what's
wins the
funny
Big
about
East.
this? I didn't mean to cut you off. There is a team in this conference that I feel it could be a bid stealer, and I think
Okay,
you might
go
agree
into
with
it.
it. This team had an up and down year. They had a great stretch.
I know
I
what you're
feel
talking about.
in the month of January, going in, and then February kind of like faltered for them. Kansas State could be that bid stealer team. I feel
It
so.
could be.
It
I
could
think
be.
they'll win one or two games. I think they'll get the upsets off, but I don't think they'll be the bid steals. That makes sense because I think they peaked too early. But I do like the pick. I think if it is going to be a bid stealer out of the Big 12, it's going to be Kansas State.
Yeah, I think if anyone was going to do it, it's probably them. Um, and you look at a team like Cincinnati because they're on the outside right now. They're one of those teams that are like
Cincinnati shouldn't even be
probably
close.
low on the bubble. They need to do a lot of work in this conference tournament to
Like
make
again,
it.
and this is crazy work too because the 13th ranked team in a conference should not be on the
I
bubble.
know
That's crazy work.
I know it is very wild that they are on the bubble as the 13th seed in the Big 12, but that's indeed the case, and it really comes down to what they've done this season because they have one quad one win that was against BYU, a bunch of quad two wins. They haven't lost any quad three or quad four games, I guess, which is good for the metrics, but they haven't really shown out anything outside of that BYU win in that there's some of their quad two games. So they have a lot of work to do in the conference tournament. And as you mentioned, they're the 13th seed. So they have to play the first game of the entire tournament. And I believe I think that's against Oklahoma State, if I'm not mistaken.
It is
Yes.
against Oklahoma State.
Yes. They very much well could lose that game. And there's no guarantee they win that game either. Um, So looking at the conference, I feel like this is tough because it'd be easy to say like Houston is going to win or Texas Tech, but it's been a down year for Kansas. They can still win the tournament. Baylor, you never know with them, and Arizona and BYU have had some good seasons, but I feel as if this could be a conference that anyone could possibly win at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And you have your pick here for this conference, the winner.
I I'm still trying to think if I had to pick one. Um, I'm gonna go with the Red Raiders. I'm gonna go with Texas Tech.
See, my gut's telling me Texas Tech, but I want to protect the St. John's number one seed propaganda right now.
That's
Like, I
fair.
want to protect that.
But you don't want us to
And
win the Big East.
no, I don't, but I don't want to protect the propaganda right now. And Texas Tech winning would be detrimental because you have
That's
so
fair.
many, this. I don't know what I want to call them right now, but just like, the dumbest of the dumb saying, oh, well, why is Texas Tech behind St. John's when it comes to terms of resume, yada, yada, stuff like that. It's because St. John's didn't lose against UCF at home. Like it's crazy work stuff like that. Like if St. John's lost to Providence at home, it's equivalent to losing to UCF at home.
Yeah.
That's why they're ahead and stuff like that. St. John's didn't lose against TCU. They didn't lose against a team like St. Joseph's. That's why St. John's is ahead of Texas Tech, and they can say, "Oh well, they have more quad one wins." Like congratulations, you beat Arizona State on the road. That's a quad one win. Arizona State was horrific this year. They had 13 wins. Their quad one win opportunity on the road. Like when you stat pad like that, oh, they beat Utah away, Texas Tech. No, you know what Utah is right now, Nick?
No.
Utah's one game above 500.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's like like Texas Tech they have this crazy yeah we have 8 quad one wins, you want to they want to like drum their chest to it. Yeah, they beat Kansas State away by 4 points where St. John's blew them out at home by 22 points. So when you take those, like, not every quad one win is the exact same thing. However, every quad two loss and quad two win holds a little bit more weight to me. And that's where I think you separate a little bit. A good seed should not be losing multiple quad two games, and they should not be losing any quad three and quad four games. That's my opinion. If that's when you're going to really dissect this, and again, because the only reason I'm bringing up St. John's and Texas Tech right now is because there's a lot of people going back and forth about their resumes where St. John's they swept UConn, they beat Marquette twice, and they beat Xavier away. I mean, that those are all good quad one wins. Those are 4 wins over the field, solid quad one wins, and those are mid seeds for Marquette and UConn. So it's like they swept the 6 seed and they swept a 7 seed or an 8 seed, and Xavier's probably an 11 or 10 right now. Where Texas
Yeah.
Tech, I mean, I guess their best win of the year is at Houston, which you can't take away from them. But again, not all quad one wins are the same because when you have wins, Arizona State, Utah, and uh, Arizona State, Kansas State, and Utah, excuse me. To me, you have 5 quad one wins. That's the way you look at it because none of those teams are in the tournament. They're counting as quad one wins. To me, those are you're 5 and 4 in quad one wins. If you want to make the argument where you have one more quad one win against St. John's, I'm going to say you have 2 quad 2 losses and a quad 3 loss. That's why they're higher in seeding. I don't care. You want to say the Big 12's this, the Big 12's that. They have one championship in the last 14 years of that conference.
So
So
who are
it's
you
not it's
picking
not
for
really
the
that great.
who are you
I'm
picking for the
picking.
Big 12?
I'm gonna pick Kansas because I want chaos. So give me Kansas.
I was thinking about Kansas. Hunter
Absolutely,
Dickinson had a great
absolutely.
game.
They probably have a 10% chance of winning that thing, but again, experience wins in March, and they have Hunter
I
Dickinson.
mean, it's also a they're at home. I mean, they're it's in Kansas City, so I mean, the home factor could play a huge factor for them as well. Yeah, think about that also when when you look at this tournament. Um, and I think for a team like West Virginia, I mean, it I think they're in, but I don't even know if winning one game will help them. They might have to win two just to firmly be locked in. If that makes sense.
I think they need one. I think they need one.
Do they just win in one game? If they win the first game,
Yeah,
they're in
yeah. Again, because they're not a quote unquote luck, but I think they just need the one win
because
right
they would
now.
most likely face TCU. I believe it would be
Yeah, so
TCU
they
or
just need to
Colorado.
avoid
They'd be
losing.
playing.
They need to lose. They need to avoid losing to TCU. Now they
Yeah,
don't need to beat TCU. They just don't need to lose against them because if they lose against TCU, that's detrimental. But they beat them, they don't really move. And then if you play someone, let's say like I don't know, like Houston the round after that, well then what can you really do? Not gonna really hold it against you.
right. All right, so let's go to the Big Ten then, Johnson. Let's go to that conference where another interesting season for the Big Ten as well. I think as compared to what we've seen in years prior, this is a conference that I think is very winnable for a lot of teams. You have Michigan State as a number one seed. Tom Izzo has gotten that team back to where they've been in years prior. Michigan, Maryland, Wisconsin, rounding out the top four. You have UCLA and Purdue as well. You have Illinois and Oregon as other 20-game winners. So you look at the top, what is it? 8 teams right there, all 20-game winners. You have Indiana right on the outside with 19 wins. That I don't know if they're firmly in. I think I would have to look at the metrics for that. But how many teams you right now are in for the Big Ten going into this tournament?
I would say the Big Ten probably has 8 teams firmly in the tournament, at least in my opinion. Those 8 teams, like you mentioned before, Maryland, Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, UCLA, Michigan, Oregon, and probably Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm looking
Ohio
at it right
State's
now.
in there.
Right now they have the bracket metrics has 9 teams in the Big Ten tournament for the Big Ten in
Yeah,
the
and again, I
tournament.
think it's going to come down to Ohio State or
And
Indiana.
yeah,
I think it's going to have one of those two. I don't maybe two of them sneak in, but again, with the bid steals, you never really
and
know.
there's one team in the bubble, which is Nebraska. That's the
Nebraska shouldn't be close. That's
yeah.
one thing. Listen, Fred Hoiberg, great, Nebraska, great, but I don't think Nebraska should be close because again, not all quad one wins are equal. And if you're going to tell me Penn State's one of your best wins in the year, maybe next year. Again, the same thing applies for Indiana with Penn State. So just to keep it consistent. Uh, let's like pump the brakes a little bit.
I'm
I
trying
actually
to see
think I
where
think I think I think Nebraska lost to Penn State actually.
I think they did too.
If I'm
Yeah, they
They
did.
did because they got blown out by them. So yeah, when you lose to Penn State on the road, that's not really great.
I think Nebraska was the third. Are they the 13 seed in the tournament?
And again, another like if it's crazy we're talking about the 13th seed
Yeah, I mean they're playing
as an
Rutgers in the
at-large
first
bid.
round. Rutgers could be a sneaky team. I feel like in this one because just because
Experience doesn't win in March.
you have Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, that's the only reason why like they're gonna have a chance to maybe win some games. Um, but for a team like I feel like I don't even know like Ohio State right now is in, but I'm not necessarily certain that they can stay in at the end of the day. If that does that make sense to you?
No, it does because they need to win games, and I don't think
Because
they
they
can.
have win, they beat in Kentucky, they beat in Purdue, they beat in Maryland. Those are pretty good wins. Um, Texas, they're on the bubble right now. That's still a good win at the time. Penn State's like a very weird win to me. Yeah,
Again, I think what
sure.
keeps them out is going to be the head to head. Losing against Indiana is going to be one of the things that keep them out.
They've lost to Northwestern. They lost to Indiana, as you mentioned. Pittsburgh.
Not only did they lose anything, they got swept by Indiana.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're talking about similar resumes, that's what keeps them out.
And what about Indiana? Do you think that they're going to probably have to do maybe some work just to solidify their spot?
I think they need a win, and they need again, no bid stealers. They're one of the teams. I think the 7 or 8 teams that are susceptible to bid stealers. Indiana's one of them.
Because Indiana right now is the 9th seed, if I'm not mistaken.
In
And
this tournament, yes,
yes, they are the 9th seed, and they would be playing the winner. Oh, they'd be playing the 8th seed, which
is it going to be
is
Oregon
Oregon,
or
who is right now locked in. So if they beat Oregon, then they're, in my opinion, if they beat Oregon, then they're probably in.
yeah, they beat Oregon. I think they go up to the 10 line, but again, we'll
Yeah.
see.
And then for Ohio State, considering that they are the 10 seed, they would be playing. They would be playing, I believe, the winner of a first round match, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, they're the 10 seed, so they'd be playing the 15. They'd be playing Penn State, which, I mean, I wouldn't be stunned if they lost to Penn State. I could see it happening. Um, they shouldn't lose that game, but I wouldn't be stunned if they do lose that game. Um, is there a bid stealer for you in this conference, or you think it's just one of those teams that are right now on the outside of the bubble, or like
No,
a
no
10
bid
or
stealers
11?
here. No
Yeah,
bid stealers. I'm gonna take Maryland to win the conference still.
you taking Maryland? Okay.
I think Maryland. I think Kevin Will gets it done. It's been a couple years since he left Seton Hall now, and I think this is gonna be the year he finally breaks through there.
I'm gonna go with Wisconsin. I'm gonna go with Wisconsin to win this one. Um, you know, it could be easy to just take Michigan State or maybe a Purdue, and it's crazy because Purdue is the 6th seed in this tournament, which is wild to think that. But I think Wisconsin as a 4 seed is a very dangerous team in this one, and considering the fact that the 1 seed who is Michigan State, they very much well could be playing each other in the semifinal matchup to get to the championship game. And we saw what Wisconsin did last season with Purdue. I think the Badgers have a good chance in them. They're one of the highest scoring teams in the entire nation. I think the Badgers get it done. The Big Ten tournament, and they
Here's my
solidify their
hot take,
seeding.
Nick. The Big Ten has a better showing in March than the SEC.
Okay, okay. I don't necessarily hate the take.
It's a hot take, but it's a reasonable take.
Yeah, you haven't been a fan of the SEC teams this year. I guess let's just go into the SEC because this is a whirlwind of a conference. There is pretty much, I think, every team besides LSU and South Carolina is either in or they're on the
Or on the
bubble.
bubble.
Right.
Yeah. And
Which is
Oklahoma should
wild.
not be on the bubble, by the way. Like, you're winning 6 games in your conference should not
Texas,
qualify
the
you
same
getting
thing
into
for
March.
Texas.
Yeah. The way I look at it, and this is going to sound crazy, I know this is early season basketball. This team almost lost to Providence on neutral, who was pedestrian, to put it nicely, in the Big East. The team that was pedestrian in the Big East also went to you know went to Utah, took BYU, and beat them by over 20 points. Again, this is early season basketball. This is before conference play, but this is the only thing we have to kind of separate the teams.
And you know what? I will
So,
say this. I want to point this out also because some of the when you look at some of the conference brackets, they don't necessarily tell you like who it is playing each other. They just say, "Oh, this number seed versus this number seed," so you have to like figure it out for yourself. I appreciate the SEC because they at least give you who the seed is and who they're playing, so I don't have to like look it up and be like, "Oh yeah, that's who they're playing." Like I have to like do the numbers off
I
my
mean,
head.
the SEC, they beat each other up. It's the
Yeah,
vibe they're going for is 2013 Big East. That's what they're looking for here. And I don't think they're going to get 2013 Big East, but I also don't think they're going to get 2024
So
Mountain West either. I think they're going to
yeah,
have somewhere in the middle of this. I think they're going to have Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, those four, which are allegedly, all gunning for a one seed.
they're all A and
Only
M's a
one of those
lock.
teams are going. Only one of those teams are going to make the Elite Eight out of those top four.
Um,
That's going to be my hot take. I think one of Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama make the Elite
yeah, they
Eight,
all can make it.
but
It'd be
not,
something.
but
It'd
they're
be wild if
all
they
not
did.
making it.
So let's look at the locks for this tournament. You mentioned Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee. They're all locks. A&M's a lock. Kentucky is a lock. I would say Ole Miss is a lock.
Georgia's a
Missouri,
lock now too.
Missouri, Georgia. You know what? Here's the thing: Georgia should be a lock, but are they going to be a
Georgia's a
lock?
lock.
Because
Georgia's a lock.
I know, but we've seen what the tournament did last season with some of the teams that we thought were locks too.
Georgia would absolutely shock me because they have good wins against other teams outside the SEC, i.e.,
Right.
us.
So Mississippi State should be in also. Is Arkansas firmly locked
Arkansas
in?
Arkansas has played themselves back into the tournament.
Yeah, right. Like I feel as of late they've been red hot to the point where they should be in.
Yeah, they're in the tournament again, but they're one of
So
those teams. If you have 5 or 6 bubble bid stealers, very susceptible.
now
Arkansas on that short list.
the teams that will be looking on the outside in is Vanderbilt in right now? If do you
Vanderbilt's
know?
in. I don't
You,
know. Actually,
do you think they're
kind of
locked in?
faltered. They've kind of faltered the last couple weeks.
Because keep in
I would say
mind,
Vanderbilt is still in. I would say Vanderbilt and Georgia are kind of interchangeable. I would
right
put them in the group of like Gonzaga, Creighton, New Mexico. Does that
now
make
here's the
sense?
thing, right? And here's the thing with this conference because let's look at the first round matches for this conference because this is really telling of where, and it's crazy because this is really telling of where this conference could go in terms of who's at the end of the day in the tournament. Arkansas's playing South Carolina, and remember, those two teams just played, and South Carolina wrecked Arkansas in that game. So you never know what happens. The winner of that game plays Ole Miss. Texas plays Vanderbilt in the first round. So if Vanderbilt loses to Texas, I'm not so sure they make the tournament if they lose that game. I think they're out if they lose.
I
And
think they're still
Texas,
in. I think they're still in.
you think they're still in even if they lose the game?
The Texas, yeah,
That's fair. Maybe, unless a bid sealer happens, which is very possible.
yeah.
Texas, I'm not saying would be in. They would have to be A&M to really make a case in their next game. Mississippi State plays LSU as the 15-10. Then winner plays Missouri. We said Mississippi State should be in. I'd be stunned if they didn't make it. And then Oklahoma plays Georgia. And the winner of that game plays Kentucky. And if Oklahoma beats Georgia, then I'm not saying Georgia's out, but I wouldn't be surprised if the committee just says, "Oh, you're on the bubble right now, and you're in a whirlwind of trouble potentially." And for Oklahoma, if they beat Kentucky the next game after, then I'm not saying they're in, but it helps their chances considering that the next game after that would be against Alabama, and then back for Texas, if they beat A&M, then they'd be playing Tennessee in the quarterfinals. So it's like anything realistically could happen with this conference, but I don't know because, like you said, there's 14 teams bidding for the tournament, and I think we're agreeing on what maybe 12 of them, I guess, being locks, with the other two on the bubble, and it's interchangeable with two of the other, with teams like Georgia and Vanderbilt if they make it or not. I think
Okay,
right now
yeah,
I say
I would
teams
agree.
are like
Yeah,
firmly locked. Like there's no if they lose one game they're done. Like even if Mississippi State lost to
I would agree.
LSU, which would be stunning, I don't see that knocking them out of the tournament. Even Arkansas, I think if they lose to South Carolina, I don't. I mean, unless they lose badly, I don't see them getting knocked out either.
So I think I'm going to take Tennessee to win the SEC here.
You go
When all
Tennessee.
that being said and done, yeah.
Uh, Man, it's tough because I picked Bama at the beginning of the season to win the national championship. I'm gonna go with Florida. To win the SEC. I don't know.
I think any of the top four. It's just obviously
Yeah,
Auburn's the heavy favorite, and we want to acknowledge that. But they've lost the last. They've had a couple losses now. Maybe they're a little shaken up. I want to see how they
but
kind of.
again, I feel this
They haven't had to respond from adversity all year. So
right. But I think you and I could both agree that I think it's better to lose your conference tournament
100% agree.
before you go into the NCAA tournament because there's so much
Yep.
more pressure as a conference champion compared to a team that's like a number one
At
or
large.
like it's like an at large number 2 seed or 3 seed, whatever, they have better chances of winning the national championship. We've seen that in years prior. I get it. UConn won the Big East last year. They won the championship. I
Anomaly.
get it. That doesn't happen very often. You see a lot more times than ever that the non-conference champions are the ones that are making the runs in the NCAA tournament. So even if Auburn went out to win the SEC, they're still going to get a 1 seed, and they're probably going to be a heavy favorite still to win the national championship because they've been that dominant this season. They've had a couple of falters as of late, but they're still going to be a 1 seed at the end of the day, even if they don't win the SEC. I think for Florida, if they win the SEC, then that probably puts them into a number 1 seed as well. That's the case, and that's the thing also for this conference too, Johnson, because you mentioned those top 4 teams. The winner of the conference is undoubtedly a 1 seed, and then after that is where it gets tricky because will there be a second 1 seed or not? That I don't know, and I don't know if I agree with it if that's the case.
Only
So
time will tell.
only time will tell. And then let's go into our favorite conference, Johnson, the last one, the Big East. We're both of the mindset, it'd be great, it would be fun to see St. John's win it. But going back to what I just said a moment ago, considering how hot this team has been as of late, we wouldn't be as upset if they lost the Big East tournament because then it gives
Absolutely
us,
not.
it kind of gives us that, what's the word I'm trying to look for? Going into the NCAA tournament, it's kind of like a wake up moment, saying, okay, you know what, we didn't win the Big East. Now it's time to wake up and make a run in the NCAA tournament. Because remember what happened this season? They went on a crazy win streak. They lost to Villanova. Then they went on another crazy win streak to end the season. So that's really what our mindset is for St. John's. But it's a fun time for us to be a St. John's fan because they are the number 1 seed for the first time in a very long time in the Big East, and they would be playing either Butler or Providence in the second round. And then
Yep.
if they get to the semifinals, they will face the winner of Marquette or Xavier. And I think we're both of the agreements that there are 5 teams locked in. You could make the case for Villanova. I'm still not certain about them. I think they still need to do some work in the tournament to
I
make it.
think I think I think Villanova's done. I think they're absolutely cooked.
I think if they so let's say they beat UConn in the second round, does that get them in?
No, because they have horrific losses early in the season. They lost to
That's true.
Columbia.
They lost to some bad teams early in
They
the
lost
year.
to Virginia. They lost to I guess
Did they lose
even
to
though it
Penn
wasn't
this
that
year, or was
bad.
that last year I'm thinking of?
No, last year they lost to
That was
Penn.
last year to Penn? Okay, yeah. I knew they had a bad loss to Penn. I just didn't know if it was this year or last year.
Yeah, they have some bad losses.
Yeah, they
They
do have
lost
some
to
bad
Virginia
losses.
and they lost to Columbia. So like that's the death knell for them.
Yeah, so I think firmly locked 5. I think Villanova will probably have to win the conference to
I wouldn't
win to
even say
make it.
Xavier's locked because of bid stealers. I still
That's
think
true.
they need to beat if they beat
If they beat
Marquette,
Marquette, they're in.
I think they're in.
Yeah, they beat Marquette, they're in. If they lose, then I agree with you. I think then it gets a little bit worrying for them because they're one of those teams that are like the last 4 in. Like they're one of the last teams into the tournament
Yes.
for a lot of people's
What
metrics.
will help them is because Xavier, the argument you're going to make for Xavier is because, again, this is why you can't say quad one, quad two wins, all this nonsense. If Xavier beats Marquette, now they have 2 wins over Marquette,
Right,
team firmly in the tournament. They have a win over Creighton in the tournament. They have a win over UConn, who's firmly in the tournament. So they have 4 wins over tournament teams that are not only just, oh, they're just barely in there. No, they're like 6, 7, 8 seed teams. So that's what's going to help them.
right. So I guess I'll ask you. I mean, who do you have winning the Big East?
Oh boy.
I think I know who you're going to take just for spite.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick UConn for
Yep,
spite.
I know it.
For absolute spite purposes, I'm gonna pick UConn. You guys can have this, and then we'll take March. We'll take the rest of March.
Uh Again, I want to pick St. John's. I'm of the same agreement with you. Like again, I would love to win it. It would be fun to cut the Nets down and win a Big East tournament. But I'd rather have the momentum going into March where we're not on a big, great win streak where we have to be like, oh man, like if we just keep winning and winning and winning, we're gonna win the whole thing. And then you lose your first round match and be like, wow, that was demoralizing. So like again, if St. John's was to win the Big East, then they put themselves in the conversation for a 1 seed. Um, I think right now maybe what they're a 2 seed as it goes for couple people. Some people has it as a 3. I think they're, in my opinion, they're a 2. I could be biased that I'm saying that, but I think they should be a 2 seed. Um, come the
I
NCAA
think if
tournament.
I think if they run the whole thing, they should be 1 seed. It's not going to
I
happen,
agree.
but
If they win the Big
and
East, no,
by the way,
100%. They win the whole
Big
thing.
East all conference,
They're number one.
Big East all conference first team was just released. I will give it to you right now. The two players that were not unanimous selections were Micah Peavy from Georgetown and Zuby Ejiofor from St. John's. The four teams which are unanimous selections and will be Player of the Year contention is Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton, Eric Dixon from Villanova, Cam Jones from Marquette, and R.J. Lewis Jr. from St. John's.
Yeah.
Goodari Richmond gets left off the first team, which I think should have been unanimous. If you take a look at pretty much every single advanced metric, he led the conference in it. If you take a look at Bartorvik or Ken Palm, the top two players in the Big East this year was Kadari Richmond and R.J. Lewis Jr. Even though I'm not the biggest Kadari Richmond fan, he did deserve it. But this is the first year since 1986 where St. John's has two players on the All Big East first team. But even the bigger story is having Kadari Richmond not on that team, so they should have three. But it is what it
Yeah.
is.
I'm gonna go with Creighton. I'm gonna go Creighton to win. I think Kalkbrenner solidifies his stats as one of the best Blue Jays of all time. I have them winning the Big East tournament. Obviously, I want St. John's to win it, but again, I've already made my point about that. So I think Creighton will get it done. I agree with you. I think the winner of Creighton and UConn will, if it gets to that point, I think will win the tournament, the entire tournament itself.
Oh, by the way, do you want to take a guess on those two St. John's players that last made the Big East, All Big East first team, 1986? Do you want to take a guess who those two players are?
1986.
Yes.
Well, shouldn't one of them be Mullen?
80. Mullen graduated 85.
Oh, damn. Walter Berry?
Walter Berry is one of them. I thought he was going to be the one you had trouble with. The second one.
Well, shouldn't
All time.
Is Mark Jackson
It, it is Mark Jackson.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mark Jackson and Walter Berry.
I always forget what year Mullen graduated.
85.
Yeah, okay.
Just,
so a year off. All right. Not bad. Not bad. But yeah, the Big East tournament should be fun as always. The tournament's always great. The Garden will be great the entire week. And for you and I, we'll see who will be playing because it's very rare for us. We've been having to watch first round matchups these last couple of years for St. John's, and we're already into the quarterfinals. We're already locked in to a quarterfinal matchup, and obviously you want to beat Butler or Providence whoever it is in that spot, but just being in the semifinals would be phenomenal. And obviously, the way the Garden has been all season with St. John's games, those games are going to be very, very loud this upcoming weekend. So it should be fun.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. So the last part of our show is let's do another updated version, Johnson, of our teams to make the Final Four, the national championship game, and to win the national championship itself. I'll look quickly to what we had last time when we made those selections because I think it wasn't too long ago when we made those picks. Let's see if I can find it in the time being. You can make if you want. You can make your picks while I look for them.
Yeah, so I have them here.
Okay,
so
you have them
I
ready?
picked the four teams you picked were Alabama, UConn, Gonzaga, UNC.
Yeah.
One of those aged well.
Yeah.
I had Duke, Houston, Kansas, and Creighton. Only two of those really aged well for me.
Yeah.
So I would say 2 for 4 beginning of the season is pretty good.
Can at least make runs. One of my teams is not even going to make the tournament. And I picked
one of your
them in
teams
the
is
national
DOA.
championship game. Yeah, I picked them in the national championship game too.
Yeah, you trusted UNC, so I mean that was your problem.
Am I responsible for UNC's downfall this year?
No, I mean I think you picked them last year too, so maybe at that point.
Yeah, that's very possible. I did that last year too. All right. Nonetheless.
Nevertheless, Final Four is hard because even though I had Duke here in the beginning of the year, I'm not going to pick Duke here because I don't think they're going to make the Final Four. Again, experience wins in March, and I think if they're going to win the ACC, they're not going to win the or make a deep run in the March. Maybe they make the Elite Eight, Sweet 16. But I don't think they go too deep after that. So I'm definitely going to pick Houston. I'm going to pick one representative from the SEC. I'm going to give it to Auburn to make the Final Four. So I'm going
Okay.
to go. I'm going Houston, Auburn. Give me Michigan State because Tom Izzo always seems to get it done in March, and I think he's got another squad that can make a deep run. And the fourth team I will pick. I have to pick a Big East team. That's the problem here. And
Oh
I
no.
refuse to pick St. John's. I'm not
I
going to pick
you
St.
can't
John's.
do it. We just can't mush it, man.
I'm going to pick Marquette.
Marquette, okay.
I'll pick Marquette as that sixth seed that makes the Final Four. So again, I'm going to go Houston, Auburn, which are the safe picks. I'm going to throw Marquette in there, and I'm going to throw Michigan State in there. So I'm going to pick two teams from the South and then two teams from the Midwest.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Duke. I agree with you. I think an SEC team is. I think an SEC team has to make it because if you have this historic of a season, and now one of your teams make the Final Four, that's really bad.
One of them is a lock. I don't know which one it is, but I'm going to pick Auburn.
I'm gonna have to roll Alabama because I went with them at the beginning of the season. I'm gonna trust my gut with them. I'll go Duke, Alabama. Um, man, it's tougher than I thought. I will go with. I'll go with Michigan State as well, and see if I pick them, then you're gonna blame me for the reason why we didn't make it there.
You can pick them as long as you don't pick them. Like we both don't pick them, we're good.
All right, it's good. I'm putting St. John's. I'll put St. John's. I have Duke, Bama, Michigan State, St. John's. So only similar team we have is Michigan State. So sorry, Spartans, you're screwed.
No, I think Izzo will do it. I think the teams to make the title game, which I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick Auburn, Michigan State as the title game with Michigan State as the winner.
Yeah, Michigan State cutting down the nets.
Michigan State. I think Izzo has one more left in him. If anything, he retires.
I can see it. I mean, that very much well could happen. I will go. I'm gonna just keep going my earlier pick. I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna say Alabama, and I will have them face. I'll have them face Duke. I'll go Bama, Duke, and I'll just stick with my earlier season pick. I'll just have Alabama cutting down the nets. Might as well. I mean, I might as well. I might as well just stick with what I had earlier this season. I think. Who did you have?
Yeah, I mean,
Did you have UConn win the net, or you had
I
Kansas?
think I had Kansas.
Yeah,
I
Kansas.
didn't have. I said UConn going back to back to back is crazy and not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I will go. I'll just stick with Bama. I'm kind of at the point where like I did it earlier in the season. I might as well just stick with it and just hope for the best. And if it doesn't work out, I really don't care. I obviously want St. John's to pull off what would be a stunning end of the regular season, or not end of the regular season, but end of the 2025 season for us, because it's been a dream pitch season for you and I watching the St. John's team, and hopefully more is to come from this season for us. Any final thoughts from you before we wrap this show up tonight?
This is March.
I couldn't have said it any better. This is indeed March. That is going to do it for this week's edition of the All Cast No Break Sports Show. College basketball season is now in full swing because March Madness is here. The conference tournaments will be getting, most of them have begun already, as I mentioned earlier on, but the bulk of it will be happening this week. And a lot of tournaments we're looking into: the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC, the Big East, and some of the mid-majors like the Mountain West, the American, and the Atlantic 10, and the West Coast Conference. But as we both mentioned as well, next Sunday will be Selection Sunday. We will break down the tournament itself next week on the show and breaking down some of the matchups that we're looking into. And we'll be looking to see maybe who could be that Cinderella team and who will be making a deep run in this year's NCAA tournament. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by my co-host Andrew Johnson for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week. This is March.